Welcome back to our channel. I hope everybody is having a great morning, afternoon, evening. Today we are going to be talking about Typhoid Mary. Why did I decide on Typhoid Mary? I think I wanted to do a series on notorious women, and for some reason Mary was the first one who popped into my head, so today is her day, and let me tell you, love her, hate her, she was quite a character. I don't even know what to say about her other than just dive into the story. But before we do, if our channel is going to be focusing on incredible stories from around the world, adventure stories, ghost stories, and true crime, because we all love true crime. At least I do. And I might be specializing in ghost stories because every time I tell someone what's going on, someone has a ghost story. So, and remember the farm? I told you I write at the farm. There's been a ghost story that I just found out about the farm. So we're going to dive into that later. But for now, let's talk about Mary. If you were to Google Mary today, a lot of things are going to come up. The most dangerous woman in the world, the most dangerous chef in the world, scary Mary, someone you would never want to meet. And by far, I kind of agree with all of those things. Maybe not the most dangerous woman in America, but they had to sell newspapers and they sold Mary. Imagine, because we've been through COVID together, imagine if somebody blamed you, kind of, for an entire epidemic, because that's kind of what they did. And they also, for the record, we're just gonna go there, they locked her up for life. The health department, the New York Health Department, from the time they took Mary, she had a brief stint out, she stayed in quarantine the rest of her life on an island where they kept people quarantined in a hospital, mostly tuberculosis, but all kinds of diseases. So if you can even wrap your head around that, the woman had a lot of reasons to be really pissed off. So let's dive into Mary because she was upset a lot. Mary was from a small town in Ireland called Cookstown in County Tyrone. And at that time, that was a really poor part of Ireland. So this is in the mid to late 1800s. Probably she had a million siblings. I mean, it was hard to make it out of the cradle alive, and then through your young years alive, your teenage years, just staying alive was like an issue. So of course Mary, like a lot of kids at the time did, if you have any chance for like an amazing life, you're gonna jump on a boat and you're gonna head to America. Now, Mary got a little bit lucky because she had a aunt and uncle in Manhattan. So I don't think a lot of the kids had that. So she got pretty lucky on that set. It doesn't seem like she stayed with them for long, but she definitely had someone to stay with. So she leaves Ireland at 15, heads to America, start her new life, and she doesn't do bad. She decides that she wants to be a cook. So she started at a low level and built her way up. So in that time period, if you were a really rich family living in Manhattan, then you could afford to have like head of laundry, head of the kitchen, head of the gardening, head of the staff. Every level down you go. So that level Mary is at when we jump into the action of this story. She is at the height of her cooking career. She's running the kitchen. So she doesn't have to. If you go one level down, you're gonna have to like cook some pancakes and clean a toilet. If you make lunch for the family, then you're gonna have to go do laundry before you start cooking dinner. But Mary didn't. She was just running her kitchen. Everybody had questions for Mary because she's gonna become infamous very soon. But everyone said she was kind of hard to talk to and very messy. Like her cook station, wherever she was, it was kind of always a mess. So she wasn't anyone's favorite person, but obviously she had to be really good at her job. Otherwise, why would she be on Park Avenue, which is where we're diving in before we go to Oyster Bay? Why is she working for the best family? So obviously she wasn't bad at her job, and apparently peach ice cream was her specialty, and we're gonna get into that. Like, no one's gonna eat peach ice cream again. Mary finds herself in Oyster Bay. This is where our story kicks into action. Oyster Bay is in Long Island, and all the New Yorkers, I mean, I think still today, anyone with money in Manhattan, they leave Manhattan in the summer. So they get out to their summer houses, like everyone goes to the Hamptons now and wherever they go. But back in the day, at this time, Oyster Bay was like playground of the rich and famous. Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, they used to call it the summer White House. So, I mean, this is like rich and famous people. And Mary, normally you wouldn't have work in the summer because everybody leaves for the summer. But Mary must have been so good because they asked her to come to the Oyster Bay. So you can imagine if you're gonna cook for somebody, being in that location might be pretty incredible. So Mary's doing her job, cooking her things. All of a sudden there's a typhoid outbreak in the house where she's working. Now, typhoid fever it's 10 to 30% chance you're gonna pass away if you get it. So nobody wants to get typhoid fever. But what really terrified people was everyone understood this disease was a poor person's disease. It was caused from bad sanitation, bad drinking water, maybe like suspicious dairy or shellfish, just general overcrowding and filth. Now it's in Oyster Bay and everybody starts losing their mind. Like, okay, this is like 12 people in a house and one of the young girl, 20 years old, young, beautiful girl, very sick. So this is a big deal. So you know the owner of the house gets out his calculator and he starts calculating, right? Like if he doesn't find out where this came from and like stop it right now, he's gonna lose a lot of money because no one's gonna wanna go stay at his house because it's like typhoid house. So he's like on his calculator panicking. So he decides to bring in an expert. He brings in a guy called George Soper. George Soper was, in his mind, he had a PhD, but in actuality, he was a health engineer, like a health, the guy you call to cure sick cities. Like he's a sanitary engineer. So he had been studying typhoid. So just so you know, during this time period, like they didn't even know what typhoid was. They had yellow fever, smallpox, scarlet fever, measles. Like people were dropping dead from everything. And then they get this new disease and everybody's like, what even is it? So they barely find out that this is typhoid fever. They really didn't even know about like an asymptomatic spreader. Like it was just all coming out. And Mr. Soper, he actually was kind of at the top of this game. So this guy shows up and he's thinking, this is gonna be so easy. I'm gonna check the water, I'm gonna check the sanitation, I'm gonna check the dairy and seafood, and then case closed, I'm gonna slurp some oysters, get some fresh air, jump in the sea and like head back. Oh no, that didn't happen. He goes, and imagine how much money he's getting paid, okay. He goes, he does all these things, he tests everything and everything comes back positive. So he's having like a small meltdown. He's like, where's it coming from, right? There's a woman that lives on the sea that sold clams and mussels to the person. Great, he's like signing the paperwork already. Like it's the woman who lives on the sea and it's her. So it must be the woman on the sea selling the oysters, like done, or the clams or whatever it was. No, he interviews families up and down the coast and they all said they bought seafood from her too and everybody was fine. So now he's back to zero. And I can only imagine he was panicking. He had to solve this case. It is said that he did like a 10-year medical history of every person in that house and all the people that came and went when they were there. Now I find that hard to believe, like really 10 years, but that's what they said. Nobody had typhoid, not one person. So apparently if you had it, you could spread it, but no one had it. So now he's like, he just can't figure it out. You know, he's got his detective hat on and he can't figure out what is going on. He figures out something must be off, like there's something I'm not asking the right question. So he starts saying, you know, what's different? What has changed? Has anything changed in this case scenario? Has anything changed? People coming and going, suspicious people, and they're like, oh, you know, we had a chef. Our chef like left without notice and without a reason. Like we don't know why she left. And so he said, what do you mean? Like when? And they said, well, like 3 weeks after the outbreak. And he's like, haha, I've got her. This is it. I gotta find the chef. I'm gonna track her down, I'm gonna test her, and she's gonna be positive and the case is gonna be closed. So he's like super excited. So now he thinks he's Sherlock Holmes. So he's like, I gotta go find this person and her name is Mary Mallon. Mary doesn't see it coming, okay? We don't know where Mary is. He doesn't know where Mary is. So he starts doing some investigative work. He finds out she's working at this house on Park Avenue. So in his excitement, right, he can't come down, he's gonna go to the house, he's gonna find her, he's gonna take her in, she's gonna have it, case closed, everybody's gonna be happy, it's gonna be incredible. So instead of like thinking it through of how this might come across to her, he shows up at the Park Avenue house without notice. Hello, I'm looking for Mary Mallon, and Mary answers the door, and imagine her shock of this guy. So he starts making accusations. You have typhoid. You're spreading typhoid. You're killing people. And he just kept attacking her. And he thought that she was gonna be like, oh my God, me? No, someone got hurt because of me. They got sick. I'll go with you right away. And guess what? She was like, no. Slams the door in his face. I think she slammed the kitchen door. Anyway, she was having none of it. She wouldn't even talk to him. And it was bad. So he leaves and he's like, okay, he like thought it through, like maybe I shouldn't have gone to her place of employment because the head of the house, her boss was there, the fellow employees were there, and it might have seemed a little aggressive, like ding, 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 like hello, really, you think so? Yeah, hello. So now he is Sherlock Holmes, okay? He's like, I'm gonna find out where she lives. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find out and I'm gonna go to her house because at least I won't embarrass her. So he finds out she has a boyfriend. The boyfriend likes to have drinks in the daytime. He's a bit of an alcoholic. Now you're looking at Mary's life. She has this like boyfriend. She's got a dog. She's got her little apartment going. Like she's living her best life. And here comes Soper and he's just trying to rip it apart. So he gets the boyfriend drunk. We don't know if he gave him money. Like, I don't know how he did it, but he got the boyfriend to take him to his apartment that they shared together. And he said it was like the worst, like a disaster, like so filthy and disorganized and like gross. He then, I don't know how he did it, but he convinces the boyfriend that, look, you know, Mary's hurting all these people. People are actually dying and more people can get sick and die. And I just need to get some samples from her. And he made it sound like, you know, I just have to get this stuff to save the people. And Mary doesn't believe me, but if we can just test her, like he probably did the angle, like if we just test her and she doesn't have it, then she's like free, like I'll never bother her again. So I don't think the boyfriend was being mean. I think he was like, yeah, we got to solve this. And then that way, one way or another, right? It's really bad. So he tells Soper when Mary comes home from work, and Mary, okay, she comes home from work, she's walking up her stairs, and he's at like outside her door, waiting for her. This guy who showed up at her work, embarrassed her, accused her, basically is calling her a killer. Imagine what she did. She screamed so bad, he ran down the stairs and like all the neighbors knew. Like she embarrassed him this time. He basically, I think he brought a doctor friend, and I don't think he brought the doctor friend to say like, oh, I have a physician. I think he brought him for like security. So both of them leave the building running. So now he's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to the health department and I'm gonna tell the health department that she's a menace to society and she's killing people and they're gonna have to take her by force because she's not gonna go. So he's like pissed. Like the first time he was like dumbfounded, and the second time he's like pissed because he wants the samples, he wants to close his case. So the health department was like, okay, you tried it twice and both times it didn't work. So maybe this time we're going to send someone else. So they do. They send this petite woman, this Dr. Josephine Baker, who becomes famous in the world later. She goes to the Park Avenue house. Need to talk to Mary. Mary opens the door. Just as she's starting to tell her, like she's starting to say, Mary, you know, we got to take you in, you got to go. You could be hurting people, making them sick, like killing them, never know it. We just need to get some tests. And guess what happens? Slams the door in her face. Dr. Baker was like, what? What? Like she could actually be killing people, like, what? So she goes back to the health department and she's like, you know what? I didn't think this was gonna be necessary, but we're gonna have to take her by force. Like she is not gonna go. She's not gonna go. Like we need to get police involved. So Dr. Baker goes back to the health department and she's like, you know what? I think Soper's right. She's not gonna go. She's not gonna go without force. And sadly, we're gonna have to use force. So they decide to send 4 police officers with Dr. Baker, and they send her in the horse-drawn carriage, ambulance carriage. So now the horse-drawn ambulance carriage pulls up outside the Park Avenue house. So like, you know, you can see the servants like looking down, like, why is there an ambulance outside of our house? The police officers surround the house. So there's every exit covered. And then Mary takes police officer number 4, or Dr. Baker, police officer number 4, and they go up the stairs, knock on the door. Who opens the door? It's Mary. And guess what she tries to do? Slam the door in their face, but she can't, because the copper already knew she was probably gonna do it. He slipped his foot in the door. So Mary makes her run for it. Now they're not expecting this. They're not expecting her to run and like now police are involved, but just in case she did run, they covered all the exits. So Mary is nowhere to be found. They have no idea where she's gone to. Where did she go? They searched the entire house. They're like, she like disappeared. Like every nook and cranny of the house has been searched top to bottom by 4 policemen. They're about to give up. And all of a sudden, one of the police officers looks out a window and he sees a chair leaned up against the fence. And he's like, no, she did not. They're like, oh my God, she scaled out of a window, scaled over a fence, like drops herself out of a window, scales over a fence, and like makes her run for it. And they're like, okay, Mary, well, we're gonna chase you. So now they're going down the street, searching every house. They're like house to house to house, like there's no way we're gonna let her get away. No, they can't find her. So again, now they're just about to give up. This is it, like this woman's pretty good. Now she's probably 230 pounds and they just didn't think she could be that athletic, and she is a nightmare. Like this woman is athletic. She can run, she can destroy, she can get away from 4 policemen and a doctor. So they're giving it up and they're just about to leave. And again, a cop looks out a window and he sees a little piece of gingham in a little outdoor bathroom. But the bathroom has trash cans in front of it, like a bunch of trash cans. And he's like, no way. She's hiding out in the outhouse and somebody helped her. Like, how is this even possible? So they go down there, they open the door, and sure enough, there's Mary hiding in a little outhouse. Imagine how pissed Mary is. They still underestimate her physical power. It took every single cop. They had to handcuff her. They have to escort her into the ambulance carriage. They said she was flopping around like a swordfish that you just pulled out of the water that was like fighting for its life, to the point, okay, 4 men and 1 doctor. The trip was so bad that the Dr. Baker had to sit on top of her. She sits on top of her the entire way. And when they asked her later, Dr. Baker, like, how was that ride for you? And she said, that was one wild ride to the hospital. So now Mary is in confinement, and because of her contagion level, they put her in a teeny tiny white on white room, like basically like a cell. They're not saying much to her. They're taking every sample from every fluid in her body. You know, I'm sure it wasn't pleasant. And that day they came back and they're like, Mary, you have typhoid fever. Like, you have it and you're spreading it. And she was like, no, I don't. They're like, no, we tested you, you do. And she's like, no, I don't. I've never been sick a day in my life, so it's not me. Like, I don't know what your problem is, but it's not me. And they were like, well, okay. So now Mary is stuck in that hospital for 2 years. They tried everything. They tried every kind of treatment they could give her to get the typhoid out of her system, and they could not get the typhoid out of her system. So they're saying now, you know, we think if we take your gallbladder, we think that the bacteria is sitting there, and if we just take it out, like, all of your problems are going to go away. And she said, no. They're like, but all of your problems could go away and you won't have to stay in the hospital anymore because you're not sick, right? You could go home. And she said, no, you're not going to cut me open. You're not going to rip out my organs just because you feel like it. And they were like, okay, so I guess we'll just keep you here. So anyway, as the time is passing, a new head of the health department comes in. He's looking at the case. Then the newspapers start to get on Mary's side a little bit. And they're like, you know, poor little Irish immigrant facing the huge Department of Health in New York and gets locked up. So the press started, even though I think she already was labeled as Typhoid Mary, but now they were like, oh, Typhoid Mary got locked up and other people have it and they're not locked up and what is going on? So she's getting some sympathy, and then one of the Hearsts got involved, and they think that the Hearst family might have funded a lawyer for Mary. So now a lawyer gets involved because she's being held against her will, not by the police, not by a crime, like for spreading. So it's the health department is holding her against her will for more than 2 years. Anyway, they sue, they get nowhere, nothing's happening. But this new health inspector, I think he gets sick of the bad publicity that they're keeping this poor innocent Irish woman and, you know, let her free. And so they sit her down and they're like, look, Mary, we want to let you out because we feel like it's been a little bit long. You shouldn't have to be here, but you're going to have to wash your hands. Like, you have to wash your hands. Like, you're literally going to the bathroom and cooking and spreading this disease. Like, you have to. Secondly, you can't cook. Like, you can't cook anymore. It's just too many people. It's too much. You have the bacteria in your body. You won't give us the gallbladder, so you can't cook anymore. You have to figure out a new career. If you can do these 2 things, we're going to let you out. Like, now, today. And she was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll do it. That's what I have to do. I'll do it. No problem. Sure. So they let her out. What do you think happens when they let Mary out? Do you think she followed the rules? Do you think Mary followed the rules? No, she did not. So she goes back to her life. She goes back to her boyfriend. She worked her way up in cooking. She was making a lot of money. She was running the kitchens. And now she's like at a low-level job. She tries laundry. She's doing the 15 to 21-year-old age range jobs for half the money, no respect. Like, it's really kind of like a horrific situation. And every job she goes to, like, it's another nightmare. So what does she start thinking? She's like, I gotta cook again. I mean, it's really all I need, like, know how to do. I can't make money doing anything else. I'm like in horrible conditions doing anything else. Like, I'm gonna secretly do it. As she's thinking this, her boyfriend gets really sick. So she admits him to the hospital and he dies. So imagine, here's the health department ruining her life. She's been in hospitals herself. She's a prisoner. And now she takes her boyfriend to the hospital to try and save his life, and he passes away. So I think at this point, I can't imagine that Mary just, like, what's left? They already took her freedom. Now her boyfriend's dead. She can't make any money. It's like she just came. She's around 40 now. So it's like 20 years. She went back 20 years. So she's like, no, I'm gonna cook again. But there's a problem. If you wanna cook, there's 2 agencies that basically staff all the rich homes. And both of those obviously know her. And trust me, she tried everything. She worked with aliases. She's worked on every single kind of name you can think of. But by now they know her. They know her face. They know Mary. Like, there's no way she can make up a fake name and go to a job and work. So she has to work in, like, industrial type of places. Like, she worked at a sanitarium. She worked at a grand hotel. I mean, if you even think about this, like, what? She worked at a little restaurant off Broadway. She was keeping busy and she was going job to job, but guess where she finally ended up? At a maternity hospital. So here's a super spreader at a maternity hospital, mothers and children, babies really, and here's Mary. So guess what happens? They have an outbreak. They have an outbreak of 30 people at this hospital. Doctors, nurses, mothers, babies, like, they have to get on it right away. And the head of the hotel calls Soper. He knows the whole story and he's like, listen, we have an outbreak, it's pretty bad. And there's a chef working in the kitchen and the staff, like, jokingly said she's Typhoid Mary because her name is Mary. Like, haha, Typhoid Mary's working, you know, in our kitchen. It's a big joke, but it wasn't. Like, he was like, do you know her handwriting? Like, if I give you samples? So they give samples to Soper and he's like, it's Mary. Typhoid Mary is literally working in your kitchen and now there's an outbreak. So now, this is when things get bad for Mary because she had enjoyed some of this sympathy, which is exactly how she feels. She does not feel that she has this disease. She does not feel she's spreading it. She feels like she's a scapegoat for an entire epidemic. Everyone's breathing down her neck. They just needed somebody to blame and they picked her. So I think that she truly didn't think she had it. She thought this was all made up and all a lie. So they have to go get her. And this time they're like, you're going back to North Border Island. So they had sent her from a Riverside hospital for 2 years and then they just couldn't solve her case. So then they sent her to North Border Island, which is where they have, like, several hospital buildings of tuberculosis, scarlet fever, like, just the worst cases that had to be quarantined. I mean, it was just like, can you imagine? Nobody wants to go to that island because you don't know if you're coming out. You're either gonna die or you're gonna be a prisoner there, and, like, people just don't really come back. Mary has to go back to North Border Island. So she goes back and everyone's scared. Like, she's spreading, she won't wash her hands and she has this bacteria and she's spreading the disease. So they actually give her a bungalow of her own. So here's all these, like, hospital buildings, like one main one and then, like, other hospitals. Now Mary gets her own bungalow because they want her isolated that badly. So it used to belong to, like, the head of the nurses for the island and it was unoccupied at that time. So from the time she got there until the day she died, she was basically held captive by the health department this entire time. Because they had bad press, they have to let her work, they have to let her make money, they have to let her do something, and the island has a lot going on in terms of, you know, they had to have enough going on that everyone who lives and works there has, you know, post office and they had a lighthouse and whatever. So Mary she gets a job in the lab. How does she get a job in the lab? Wouldn't every single thing she touched be contaminated? She doesn't wash her hands. She doesn't want to. She doesn't have to. She doesn't believe she has it. She knows if she just washes her hands right, if she just does this, everything's gonna be fine, but she doesn't believe it. So I don't know they got any work done. But she became friends with the initial woman who worked there, was a German heiress, and she became friends with her. And it's kind of understood that maybe she gave her like busy work, like, oh, you go over there in the corner and you work on these things, and maybe they didn't even exist. Like maybe everything was fake. But it's just keep Mary busy and away from all the work that's actually being done there. After her, a new young woman came in and took her position, and then Mary terrified her. Like apparently, so Mary was like a larger woman as a younger woman, but you know, still super athletic, obviously, as we found out. But by the end, they said she just kept getting bigger and bigger, and then she would tie her hair back in this like really tight bun kind of in the back of her head. And so she just kind of started looking like a man, like the way that she would walk, the way she had her hair. The woman who took over from the German heiress in the lab, she said the first time she got sent there for like some strange reason. She's there and she sees Mary come out, and Mary's large woman and tall, and she has this lab coat, like this oversized lab coat, and it like basically went to the floor, and she said it was filthy. Like the lab coat was filthy, like it was a nightmare. Anyway, she was really scared of Mary, but apparently they must have become friends because the years had passed and Mary didn't show up for work one day, and this woman like knew something was wrong. She always showed up, and so she went to her bungalow, and first of all, can't get inside. She was like trying to push the door open because no one's answering, like can't get in. She said that you couldn't even walk through the bungalow because it was packed with stuff and it was filthy and it was like a disaster. And like, how could you be comfortable? You can't even walk, let alone sit and enjoy a tea. So Mary had had a stroke, and it turns out she's spent like the last 5 years bedridden. It's sad. After all of this, I don't know if she got spiteful because the fact that she worked with mothers and children, even if there was a slight possibility she was spreading something, but she was a character. Like she was a character. Like she, in her mind, she was attacked for something she never did, and a spreader for a sickness she never in her mind had. And it turns out, like after they really did the math on the subject, they think that she probably got it from her mother during birth. So she probably had it from the beginning, and then that's why she never had a symptom. It turns out 400 other people they found that were carriers, and nobody else was locked up. Mary was the only one locked up. So on some level, she was like a target. But the Great Depression hit at the end of her life, and ironically, a lot of women her age didn't have work. Like they lost their jobs, they lost their homes, they become homeless, like life became horrible. So in this weird sort of twisted way around the story, at the end of her life, she had 3 meals a day, she had a job, she had her friends, she had her own place to live. And at that time period in the US, the life expectancy was 40 years, and she made it, I think 48 or 50 years. So she did pretty good. So I don't know, what do you think? You know, is she the most dangerous woman in the world? Did she kill on purpose? Was she like a psychopathic serial killer? You know, I don't know. I think Scary Mary, that is a pretty funny term, and also you don't want to bump into her because you might die. So that is our story on Typhoid Mary. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time getting to know her, the little part that I did. The next story up is going to be the Winchester Mystery House. So we're going to kind of stay in the Victorian-ish era. I already can't believe what I'm reading. My dad took me as a child to go see that house because it's near where I'm from. And I remember the story one way, but when I started diving into the research, I'm like, wow, it's actually a lot bigger than I thought. So I'm excited to bring that one next. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your support. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, comment, let me know. My plan is the first year I'm just gonna be telling stories, and then the second year I'm gonna start going places. So we're gonna go places and we're gonna check stuff out. So thank you again for your support. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening. Don't forget to lock your door. Thank you again. I forgot to mention my favorite part. I bet you didn't know, Anthony Bourdain wrote a book on Typhoid Mary. When I found this out, I was like, oh my God, my research is gonna be so much fun. So I got this on Amazon, got it delivered. So amusing. His whole take on her was so fun, and he had an affinity for her. He, you know, chef to chef. He just had a lot of hilarious things to say, and his usual amazing storytelling. I thought it was great.